Hi, Evelina. Hi, everyone who's listening.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm well. I'm well. I'm just recovering from a cold, so I've had a nice restful weekend. How about you?
Yeah, good. Having a busy week and just yeah, working through. And what was interesting this week, I've been having quite a lot of calls and workshops with clients, with potential clients, with users, different stakeholders, and I've realized a very important question that is coming my way, or sometimes I can see that there is a boundary, kind of an uncertainty that people don't have clarity on that I think would be useful to use this call to address. And that is the difference between wellness and well-being. And I
Mm,
see very often that people don't know the difference, or they're just kind of using those terms interchangeably as if they are the same thing. And that shows to me that people don't actually understand what well-being really is, right? And if we have lack of that knowledge, how can we really influence, and how can we understand all of the contributing factors that are then resulting in anyone's well-being and mental health? So I thought it would be interesting to clarify that. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And when we talk about wellness and well-being, what are your first impressions? And after kind of working together and the research that you're doing, what is it that you kind of realized what it really is?
yeah, so I think this is something that I certainly wasn't initially sure about when I first heard the terms. And I think that it's taken a bit of digging deeper into it to really actually separate what they are. And it's one side of it, the wellness side is a lot more kind of practice oriented. So it's looking at kind of actions, what you're doing, your processes. And the well-being side of it is more related to a state. So a state of being, and one which is, and I suppose that's the side of things that I think get referred to a lot of the time, that but I think the word well-being can sometimes be used actually when the word wellness is more appropriate. And so the word well-being for me connotes, a state of kind of health, of course, but also a state of contentment and kind of fulfillment, connection with yourself, with the world. This kind of sense of inner peace, and there's also kind of part of being within your community. So if we're thinking about our connection with ourselves and our connections with others, but there's also a sense of place and a sense of belonging within your community, wherever the bounds of that community might be, your family, your
Mm.
cultural community, your work. And then, yeah, the kind of wellness practices are the things that we do in the hope
Yeah.
of gaining well-being.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely a kind of nice way of looking at it, as a kind of a process and practice, kind of daily habits versus, the state of being and the kind of the outcome of, feeling happy and healthy and content and, having access to resources. So it's actually much broader, much more kind of ecosystemic approach. When we look at the actual dictionary definitions, wellness is also defined as a state of health in your mind and body, but it's very deliberately created practice, and it's a intentional approach to preventative health, essentially, right?
Mhm.
So even though it kind of implies state, it's still a process, like you mentioned. So really, wellness is a process and a practice. It's a preventative approach to health rather than kind of treating illness.
Mm,
And it's really looking at being in a healthy body and mind as a result of things that we do, right? So it's really about self-care, and it is an individual responsibility of what is it exactly that I am doing to be well. right? So when you talk about yoga, meditation, mindfulness, healthy eating, exercising, that is wellness, right? As a practice, as a routine, as habits to engage in that. But then when we talk about well-being, it kind of includes, the way I see it, it's probably like wellness is a small part of well-being. So well-being is so much bigger than that, because this is not just about health. And this is not only about what we do. And this goes beyond individual roles and responsibilities. This actually includes the wider environmental, socioeconomic factors. It includes access to resources. It includes, kind of state of satisfaction, as well as health, happiness, prosperity, and welfare. It's included in that. And here, it's not just individual responsibility, right? The sense of well-being is a result of all of these other factors that are contributing to it, including daily practices, but it's also so much more than that, right? It's access to financial resources. It's your right to feel safe, for example. It's your sense of belonging and leading meaningful and fulfilling lives. So here it's really, I think responsibility now is not on the individual anymore. It is on this wider socioeconomic environment, and making sure that that environment is equipping every individual to be at their best and actually perform at their best. And now this is not just only how we feel and about our health, but about contribution that every individual is also able then to make in life, work, society, specific businesses that we are in as a result of our well-being.
Absolutely. And I think that's really, really important to make that distinction, in that individuals can engage in wellness practices, but one individual cannot be wholly responsible for their well-being. We are part of networks, communities, ecosystems, economies, environments. We are constituent parts of that, and all of those things affect and contribute or detract from our well-being. And so I think that's a really useful thing for individuals, but also organizations, companies, anyone who has responsibility, even local government leaders, anyone who has responsibility over an environment, to be aware of, for individuals to know that if you don't feel in a perfect state of well-being, there are some things that you can do in your practices, in your wellness practices, but there's also a level of responsibility that does need to be held by the kind of orchestrators of your environment, be that your working environment, your home environment, whichever. And I think that's it's quite a useful prompt to think just generally about human health as a kind of in more of a holistic way. So thinking about not kind of the individual and our daily practices, but just widening the zoom lens a little bit, and kind of looking at all of the other factors that come into it, and really thinking about well-being in terms of the well-being of a society, and the well-being of the society supports the well-being.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to understand the difference, because very often I see organizations are saying we have well-being strategy in place, right? But what they really do is wellness, right? Here is your gym membership. Here is your yoga class during lunch. Here is your, whatever fruit bowl. There is your cycling to work scheme. Those are things that actually making a difference by helping individuals to kind of embed some of those healthy habits and build those preventative systems to maintain their health and well-being in a kind of best state that it's possible. But that in itself is not well-being, and it's not a strategy either, right? Because you cannot solve I don't know, someone's depression with your yoga class. You cannot really get someone out of abusive relationship by offering them some mindfulness meditation app, right? If somebody is addicted to gambling and don't know how to manage their money, right? you can get them to cycle to work as much as you like, but actually there are deeper problems within that person's life that doesn't actually are never getting addressed by what they so-called, like, this is our organizational approach to well-being. No, it's a as a culture of organization, you can help to embed some wellness practices in the way you do things as part of your culture. But actually, well-being strategy is really taking responsibility, not just for, how this person is engaging on a daily basis in kind of your yoga, meditation, or whatever, but actually, how happy are they? How happy this person is with themselves, how happy they are with their life, how happy they are with their work, how happy they are with other people who are in their life surrounding them. So it is still very rare that organizations would kind of take that holistic approach and say, am I really providing this person with the right support when they're going through grieving process after losing a loved one? Am I supporting this person in a right way when they are going through menopause, through fertility treatment, and all of those cases that are still invisible, and yet they put so much pressure on individual to still perform and do well. And I made this post a couple of weeks ago where you saw that I kind of shared some things that I regret, right? And I think there's so many of those things when we don't even share, right? It's like personal life is something very different. What you cope, what you deal with, it's not accepted, not included. It's not even like, it's not wanted to be heard, right? So you end up hiding certain aspects of yourself. You cannot bring your whole self to work, and that affects your productivity, your performance, your happiness, your ability to contribute and create some sort of equal even value and results for that company, right? So definitely, I think, a lot of work that we do here at Elite Mind Academy is really looking taking a step back and actually looking at the way we live and the way we work from neuroscience point of view is just so far away to how we as human beings have evolved to thrive, right? And actually take that evolutionary approach to say, okay, so if we know that this is what individuals need, if these are our requirements to be well, to perform well, to be happy, to lead meaningful, fulfilling lives, and actually be contributing to the society and to the business in economic terms, what do we really need, right? And if we take this evolutionary approach and we understand very well how our individual nervous system is shaped by the environment, we can then take the responses of these individuals as a feedback to what is it exactly that needs to change in our environment to provide for the needs of that individual, and then design strategic approach to provide for those needs and address some of those challenges and provide this access to support.
Absolutely. And it's that kind of approach that I think if more organizations were able to take that responsibility, then they would actually see a huge improvement in their, employee retention rates, but also just in, how they feel as leaders of companies, but also how their employees feel, their reputation, and these things kind of spread far and wide, really. And it's that often these wellness packages act as a kind of mirroring back of responsibility. I think it's like, well, we've given you everything you need to maintain your well-being, without actually acknowledging themselves as part of that process and part of that network. And so having that distinction between wellness and well-being, I think, can really add a kind of structure to how we understand responsibility as individuals and as organizations. As individuals, we can take responsibility for our wellness practices. As organizations, we also have to take responsibility for well-being, because we are kind of the holders and the orchestrators of those environments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're rightly saying that, only by having some of those practices, wellness offers essentially on the list, like this is available. It's all very well to help and embed those habits, but it is only as good as the extent to which each individual is able to engage with those services, and to what extent they are able to apply this as part of their daily ways of working and daily ways of doing things. So you can have access to some of those things, but maybe their ways of working are so toxic and so tiring that they don't have energy to go to the gym after that, even if you are
Absolutely.
paying for that. And this is one of the biggest problems with some of these organizational initiatives, is that companies putting all of these apps, library of tools and resources that no one is actually using. So you're setting up, so this is our wellness platform, this is our well-being platform. But when you look at the engagement levels and to what degree this is actually making a difference to that person, it's very little. The engagement levels are usually very small, especially of some of those digital platforms. And companies spend a lot of money on some of those initiatives. And instead, if we're looking at this more kind of strategic approach, and we're looking at the needs of the environment and the needs of the individual, and how we can measure well-being at individual level, how we can measure organizational capacity to provide for those needs of the individual, now we can devise strategic approaches in the way we lead, in the way we work, in the way we communicate, in the way we support each other, that, you know what, doesn't cost the earth. And you don't have to have these, wonderful, expensive, shiny, flashy apps and expensive wellness providers. Actually, it's really going back to basics and understanding the human needs, understanding the way to measure it, so we have a standard to listen, to provide for those needs, and constantly reassess and reevaluate ourselves, because we are humans and our needs will change. The businesses are evolving and changing all the time. So the key is really in having those clear measures on individual level and organizational level, so you can constantly assess the needs, constantly assess how well is environment providing for that, and have the feedback loops between the two, so you're constantly improving it strategically, rather than just having this kind of superficial shiny apps to cover up that it just kind of looks good. So yeah,
Definitely. And it is like you describe, it's this constant conversation, it's this connected, moving organism, really, that supports well-being. And if we think about, if we always make sure that we're kind of thinking about communities, organizations, individuals, groups of people as organisms, I think that can really help with that, because everything is growing and changing all of the time, and it's about embedding these practices into the structure of what is happening and what's going on. Because like you say, if somebody's working a 60-hour week or a 70-hour week, and but they have a gym membership, well, it doesn't matter, because they're not going to be able to use it. But if you actually embed that physical health into the process of the organization, like you say, have impact measures to assess what somebody's state of well-being is in various categories, then you always have a constant running picture of where you can intervene to better it, and what kind of changes you might need to make as an organization.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this is, as you know, that's what we do in our organization as part of Elite Mind Academy. We have a lot to be done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think we're out of time for today, but I think that that's a really important message. So I'm excited to keep going with this work.
Right. Thanks a lot, Valentina. And thank you everyone for listening. Any questions, please do send them our way, and we'll speak to you soon.